شغل كرسي المهندس عبد الله بوشان لابحاث النحل بجامعه الملك سعود. عندنا اكثر من 100 ورقه بحثيه منشوره. جميع الاوراق العلميه موجوده في موقع الكرسي او في موقع معهد جمعيه النحالين التعاونيه الدولي للتدريب. يعني الاوراق كامله وموجوده. حبيت صحح معلومه، السعوديه استوردت العام الماضي اكثر من 700,000 طن نحل. 700,000 packages they imported last year. كما ذكرت جميع الابحاث موجوده. الشيء الكويس انه بدانا نربط البحث العلمي بالتطبيق الميداني، فالان بدانا نصمم خلايا بناء على الدراسات اللي عملت هذه اللي هو البي سبيس والمقاس الخليه، ففي خلايا خاصه بالنحل البلدي تصنع الان بناء على نتائج البحث العلمي. شكرا دكتور نورة.
شكرا دكتور نورة، شكرا دكتور أحمد. إذا في أي استفسارات أو أسئلة، أي حدا بيحب يوجه أي سؤال أو استفسار، لا أكيد في سر بالموضوع اليوم ولا حدا راضي يسأل. Okay, so we will go to the other lecture with the Professor Denis Anderson. He will talk about pathway for Emirati honey bread. Dr. or Professor Denis, he is from the Food Control Authority in Emirati. You are welcome. You have 15 minutes.
Okay, good morning everybody. I hope you're enjoying the forum. Today I want to talk about a project that we've been running in Abu Dhabi for the last 3 years. We're now into the 4th year, and the general objective was to try to get to a position where we can actually breed our own bees here and reduce the number of imports. Okay, so just to give you a bit of background, to say that beekeeping is difficult here is an understatement. The background against what we're up against is that honeybees, for a start, are not native to Abu Dhabi. We have an extreme climate. Basically, it's a desert environment, and it gets very hot in summer, sometimes into the 60 degrees Celsius and higher. There's very little natural forage. Most of the forage is actually in plantations. So if you go out onto the roads from here up to Dubai or to Al Ain and look at all those plants, there's normally a tube going to the base of each one, supplying them with water. Nothing is natural. Because of that, there's very strong competition amongst the beekeepers for the forage that is available. And there's a unique assortment of pests here as well. Okay. I seem to be stuck there. The next one. Okay. This is basically how beekeeping was done before the project started. Is that basically we call it a 4-step process of keeping bees. Is that first packages were or nuclei hives were introduced. These are put straight into boxes just before a honey flow, normally the cedar or the sama. The bees are moved straight onto the honey flow, and then shortly after the bees die. This is repeated normally twice a year. Now, the yearly beekeeping calendar, we have the summer, extreme temperatures. We have 2 flows, the cedar and the sama, like you do in most other Arab countries. In between the cedar and the sama, there's a little bit of additional forage in the way of gaff and damas and a few other plants. Over the summer period of 3 months, there's basically no forage at all for the bees, and it's extremely hot. Just before the cedar, bees are imported mostly from Egypt, and bees are imported again just before the sama. The bees imported for the sitta are normally dead by the end of winter. The bees imported for summer are dead by the end of summer. If they're not, when a migratory bird in the genus Merops arrives, it will clean up any bees that remain. Okay, so if you're going to produce bees here, you've got to be able to get them to live. That's the number one step. Well, if you can't make bees live, you cannot breed bees, basically, because you can't move the genes forward. So first off, the program has been involved with making beekeeping sustainable. In other words, to stop the bees from dying. And they have to go all the year round, but not only that, from year to year. So the first part of the project has been that, basically. And it's been a project unto itself, and it's ongoing. I'm not going to go into all the details of how we've overcome it, except to say that we've introduced a suite of technologies that have actually addressed the major issues here, which are the major issues that beekeepers encounter everywhere. And that is pests and diseases. So we've got Varroa here, which is obvious. And we've introduced techniques in there that beekeepers can use to control Varroa. They haven't controlled Varroa before, but they can now. Poor nutrition, we've introduced supplement feeding, and also we're in the process of increasing the forage plants in nurseries, and we've actually moved some out into the field that are proving quite good. The extreme summer conditions, we've actually developed shelters so that we can get the temperature down below the 50 degrees C. Bees cannot normally survive above that 50, so you've got to get the temperatures down. And predation by bee-eating birds is something we've just recently overcome. Now, we're still working on these. You just don't fix problems overnight. These are ongoing cures, and they will be further improved through time. But the fact is, we've got them to work, and at the moment, if you introduce what we've got, then the bees will survive throughout the year, and they will go from year to year. So we've got the bees to survive. The three components that were really found important for keeping the bees alive is that the first one is to do with summer. And this is sort of contrary to what people are used to here. But it's only the strong hives that you take into summer that actually survive the summer. Because all populations actually go down in the summer because the queens become affected, the queens begin to stop laying, the humidity comes in and dehydrates eggs, etc. So the colony's reproduction becomes affected, the colonies go down. If you start from a single hive, normally it just goes down and peters out. The double, it'll go to a single. A triple will go to a double. So the general principle is that you need large, strong colonies to get you through the summer. That's important. The second one is that the queens really don't go more than a year here. They get severely affected by the summer temperatures, and normally after summer, that they'll last for a while, but then normally not much more than a year. The other thing is you have to have the shelters for bees below the 50 degrees C. We've had colonies here in Abu Dhabi that actually completely melt down over summer. So the temperatures out there, the ambient temperatures, must be above 62 degrees centigrade because that's the melting temperature of wax. So you've got to get the shelters in a situation where you can get them down below 50. We've actually invited a speaker here to the conference who spoke yesterday about the small hive beetle. We're looking at that and sort of thinking we might be able to integrate some of that technology in with the sheltering of the bees, so we can get them down to about 50 degrees C in the shelters. Maybe with technology like was shown yesterday with the stingless bees, we might be able to move them down a bit further, which would be great. Okay, So now that we've got the bees to survive, we've actually attempted now to establish an Emirati bred bee, or I'll be more specific, an Abu Dhabi bred bee, because the UAE consists of different environments, and what we find here in Abu Dhabi, they may not be applicable into other Emirates like Ras Al Khaimah and parts of Dubai and Fujairah, which have got mountain environments, so it's cooler. So the bees that we're producing really are Emirati bred for the conditions of Abu Dhabi. So to begin the project, we imported queen bees. This represents numbers of queen bees. We got them from 5 different countries with environments that basically are similar to Abu Dhabi, but not as severe. So Jordan, Egypt, Oman, Saudi Arabia. We took 4 lines out of Australia. All of these queens actually come from breeding programs. So we actually introduced the best stock that we could get. Out of Saudi Arabia, I'll just point out now, we were led to believe, and I believe this, is that they were some of the best bees that are produced. I know there's different lines in Saudi Arabia, but we were told that these were some of the best, so we imported those. When we imported them, we introduced them. We imported them mainly in the autumn. Thank you. And so we put them into standardised 10-frame boxes. We monitored them over the autumn, the winter, the spring, and we monitored them for these traits. So, and the traits receive different weighings. So obviously things like honey production, population size, had higher weighting than something like the brood pattern or steadiness, etc., which were lower down. But in all, a queen over a month was assessed on those traits, and she got a ranking out of 27. Now, which are each of these weighings. They were then averaged for each line, the queens in each line, so that you could get an average for each line out of 27. Okay, what we found was I'm having another problem there with just moving forward. Okay, what we found, okay, these are the lines that we brought in. These are the queens assessed. Even though we brought in more, 20 say in each line, some died and they were removed from the assessments. These are the final rankings out of 25 for each line now. Not unexpected, there were good queens in every line, but we were more interested in the whole genetics of the line. So that's why we took a line rating. And what we actually found there was that there was 2 lines, one from Saudi that was really good, and one from Australia, which was actually developed for good hygienic behaviour and run by a person who come out of Marla Spivak's lab in Minnesota. So they were the 2 lines we ended up with. What we did though is that when we looked at those lines, they were a bit different. The Saudis, of course, ranked high in some traits but low in others, the same with the Australians. So the Australian bees were very quiet but not so good on honey production and other things. The Saudis were good on honey production, not so good on temperament. So, but they were still good lines. So what we did then is take them through the critical part of the year here, which is the summer. And we used different assessments here. So we looked at honey production, of course, and then we looked at survival over the summer. Did they make it through? How many made them through? The colony recovery, which is incredibly important over summer because the queens become affected, and sometimes we've noticed it takes them a long time to recover. So that That's important because at the end of the summer, you've got a cedar flow, which just happens right at the end of summer. And the rate of population once they start increasing. So we took 10 of the Australian queens, 10 of the Sardis. We did the same assessments. The ranking here was out of 20. And what we found, there's the result. So the Sardi bees, which are basically, people have talked about them here, they have an origin in Jamaica, and we haven't typed them, but all the information that we're getting, they're small bees. There's no doubt about it. They just outperform anything. And I'm an Australian, I should be biased and sort of say the Australian bees are best. But when you see something outperform, it's absolutely no doubt. The Sardis are best for this environment. And so that's what we're taking on now. And this is the system that we're using. We're now coming into the F3s. This is where we started at the imports, the line. We actually produced queens from that line to get the F1s. We used the drones from the queens that we imported in isolated matings. Easy enough to get here because there's plenty of desert out there and you can just take them into areas and get the isolated mating. You don't need artificial insemination or anything. Then we select the best of these guys. Where am I? Produce the virgins. Yeah, you get your colonies here, produce the best of the F1s, produce virgins from them. What we've done here is to actually make them with the rest of the colonies out of the F1s, but also to introduce some new queens from where we sourced these from. And that effect actually ensures that you're not getting into inbreeding. So you can get into very expensive breeding systems, but we can't get into that. We've got to work a system that works and it's ongoing and cheap. So this is the system that we're using. We're here now about to go into F3s. So, okay, just to conclude then, what does beekeeping now look like in Abu Dhabi compared to before where I showed you import, death, import, death? Okay, it starts off, year one, we import bees. These bees, we take them around, we increase their strength in the winter, normally by mite control, feeding supplements, increasing the forage available to stock. Requeen the bees in spring just before the summer. After summer, start building on the strength just before summer arrives. So get the bees from single up into doubles or doubles up into triples if you can. Then shelter at 50 or below, preferably a lot below. Increase the strength right at the end of summer, which is difficult because we have the bird coming through, but we've overcome that now because we moved the bees out into environments where the bird doesn't arrive for that short period and then move them back. Okay, but we take the bees right through. Notice there's no imports coming on here. So we take them back around to spring. We requeen them here in the second year. We go through the cycle again. No imports. Around, come into the third year, we go, that's where we're up to at the moment. No imports there. So you see, we've actually got the bees into a more sustainable pattern, so to speak. Okay, so where to? Looking forward, we have to change the mindset of beekeepers. Most beekeepers in Abu Dhabi use single boxes and they're used to importing bees and not looking after them. So we have to teach them actually how to get the bees up into stronger boxes and keep them going year after year. That's a major thing, probably the biggest challenge that we'll have. We have improve the beekeeping methods. As I said, that suite of technologies is not finished. We have to keep improving that through time. Research facilities, we've just had an Australian up here just recently who's helped us optimise the laboratory for DNA technology, and just last week we picked up our first viruses and pathogens using DNA PCR technology. We're further developing that into the research aspect. And we're continuing on with the Emirati bee. Okay, just in conclusion, I'd like to thank the Ministry of Presidential Affairs, ADAFCA, Abu Dhabi Farmer Services Centres and beekeepers from the region, also Sheikh Mansour Al Nayan, who actually supports the project, and we're very grateful for that. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Yes, if there is any question, start with Dr. Ahmed.
Thank you, Dennis. This is very good research. I have one question. We have problem with the beekeepers in Saudi Arabia and maybe here in Abu Dhabi. They think when they import, it is more cheaper, economical for them than to keep the bees for the next season. What do you think?
Okay, you heard the question. Some beekeepers think that it's cheaper each year to import the bees and not look after them, let them die and import again. That means twice a year you have to import. So each year it cost us about 300 dirhams, 350 dirhams for a nucleus colony to put in. You get 5 frames. You need that twice a year. There's 1,000 dirhams gone before you start. Now, just to show beekeepers, but we haven't really done the cost-benefit analysis, but we're doing it. But the first thing we did last year, we put triples onto Sama, and we put them side by side. We had 10 they were double hives with an empty box with drawn super on the top. On the side, we had a standard single box made up of packages that were imported from Egypt. We compared the honey production side by side at Hatta. What we found, it was a very poor year for Sama last year, but we found that the triples actually produced 10 times more honey than the singles. Now, I say to beekeepers here is that going into triple boxes doesn't mean to say that you're going to produce more honey. But if you can produce as much from 20 doubles as what you can 100 singles, then or 10 doubles versus 100, because you can produce 10 times more honey, then economically it doesn't make sense to be running 100 boxes. You should be running 10. And we'll do the figures on it and come it out so that we can show beekeepers the sense of this. But it's a lot more efficient to produce that same amount of honey with less colonies and to actually stop the business of importations all the time and actually start working on a bee, using a bee which is adapted to these conditions. And there's no doubt that our results, which are backed by the science, are showing that this bee is the bee we should be using here under these conditions.
Thank you very much. Actually, the outcome of this project for the people who knows bees in this region is like a thumb of rule, a rule of thumb. And this outcome, the result, that Saudi honeybees is the best suited for beekeeping in Emirates, is like a rule of thumb for the bees who know, for the people who know bees of the region. So I think the result may be correct, or the most correct, but you ignored many aspects here. First of all, when we compare many subspecies of bees from neighboring countries, the numbers should be equal. So you took 18 from Saudi Arabia, 7 from Syriaca, and 3 or I don't know from. So here you ignored a lot of statistical things. And also you depend on totals or on average. When we depend on total and average, you know, we could not go inside the data. However, I think Saudi Arabia, the bees of Saudi Arabia is best suited for the whole region, from Kuwait, Emirates, Qatar, Sultanate Oman, Yemen, and so on. This is all beekeepers know this. No, that's not my opinion. This is my result outcomes. I work for this for 9 years here, and I know why I'm speaking. Thank you. If you have some comments about the numbers, why you use unequal numbers of colonies, and why you did not do the statistical analysis, I cannot. In statistics, 4 equals 5 is correct, but in mathematics, 4 equals 5 is wrong. So I want to see standard errors. I want to see equal number of colonies, not just like that to tell me totals or averages, and then you run a strategic project for Emirates. Thank you.
If I can just comment, just one comment, is that the number of bees imported, queens, was exactly the same, except for Jordan, where it was 10, we couldn't get 20. But it was 20, and they were introduced all under the same conditions, which is telling you something about what can survive here for a start. The numbers that we actually ended up testing were ones that didn't make it to the testing because they couldn't survive to the testing. So that tells you a lot in the end. And a lot of the ones that survived to get monitored were the ones from the local area. So that says something in itself. So the experiment was started from the same number and went into the same standardised colonies, just that there was death on the way. And there's not much you can do to overcome that. You could repeat the experiment and end up with the same result. Sure, your statistics are going to be affected by that. But the thing is, you started off on the same, that's the result you got, which is telling you a lot about survival.
I ask you, how do you know that the races you used is pure races? You see that it's F0. The queens you bring from Jordan was F0, pure. I think we have no pure races in Jordan.
Okay, how do we know that the lines we bought were pure? We don't. In fact, the lines probably weren't pure. Even the ones from Saudi Arabia, as we saw yesterday, they're not totally pure. There's no pure race, I don't think, of any bee in the world. Even the Italian bees are not pure. The Carniolan, the Caucasian, there's no pure. We bought in lines, though, where there's a breeding program behind those lines, so that we were trying to get the best of the best. Yeah.
The last question.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. طبعا بالنسبة للعينات الملكات اللي أخذها الدكتور هي من عندي أنا، والعينات هذه عبارة عن هجين من النحل المحلي في المملكة العربية السعودية. قمت بهذا التهجين قبل تقريبا 20 سنة، وأشرف عليها الدكتور محمد سعيد السراج، وعبارة عن أخذ أنماط من نفس النحل البلدي الموجود عندنا في المملكة العربية السعودية، وتهجينه على مدى 5 سنوات متتابعة في أماكن معزولة حتى حصلنا على هذه الفصيلة اللي شاهدت نتائجها الآن، والحمد لله يعني نتائج رائعة جدا. وهذا البحث ما هو إلا من هذه الفصيلة اللي اشتغل عليها الدكتور دينيس.
Yeah, this is the chap from Mr. Okay. That we got the bees from Saudi Arabia. He had 4 lines that he told us about, and he's actually selected, produced, and selected a bee from those 4 lines. Basically, they're all small, the bees. He's saying that they're 4 lines. He's developing his own particular bee. But he's been working on this for a long time. And the people we talk to in Saudi regard those bees as very good bees. But again, they come out of a breeding program or a system of improvement. You're using improvement. The lines that we got from Australia as well, they come from the Better Bee breeding program. On the East Coast, they come out of breeding programs. The ones from Oman are being selected. The ones from Jordan were in a selection program. The ones that we just had there were Egyptian bees, and we don't know what to call those. I mean, they were just Egyptian bees, and we know that Egyptian bees are a mix of everything. They didn't come out of any breeding program because we're not aware of the program up there that we could have got them through.
We have last question.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Thanks, Dr. Denis. You have made a great job already. What substances was suitable for feeding this golden bee, A.M. Jamantica, for pollen substitutions? What substances were given to this as a pollen substitution, for Apis mellifera jamantica? What substance?
Welcome back.
Our nutritional work is not just based around Germania. It's based on the other bees that we had in the apiary as well. So that's separate work from the breeding work. The breeding work's being done at the side, yeah? The survival was a separate project. But what we found is that there was no supplements, basically. Very little being fed here, if any. So we brought in a chap from Australia initially to help us with this. And we based a lot of the work around stuff that the group has done. Also, a fellow called Doug Somerville down in Australia who's been working, done a lot. He did his PhD on bee nutrition. They've developed food down there, which we tried to introduce here. Amazingly, I'll tell you one interesting result that we found from the nutrition, and it comes back to the people promoting their products out the back here, is that we had a beekeeper in Australia who was producing bees and producing a supplement on the side. The supplement he was selling all around Australia, it's a big seller. The bees go for it. We bought his bees to Abu Dhabi. We bought his supplement to Abu Dhabi. His own bees would not eat his supplement in Abu Dhabi. What do you say to that? And these people are sort of promoting these supplements that work all around the world.